This appears to be in the range of RV parks. This seems like the best of the best.
There's certainly this connotation for mobile home parks, which is not great. But then you have like this one's pretty nice.
RV parks are a subset of the mobile home park world. And this is a subset of super class A type world.
Welcome to this week's edition of Real Estate Anonymous. We have a deal type we haven't talked about before, a higher end motor coach / RV park in the foreign country by the name of Florida. Don't hold that against us. It's a deal outside of Fort Myers, 127 high end RV pads. I'm a buyer of this. I don't know if my two compadres here are with me on this, but this deal is certainly one for the Florida man. Hope you guys enjoy, and we'll pick it up next week.
All right. Good morning. Welcome into Real Estate Anonymous podcast. Eric Weatherholtz, Brett Moss, Elliott White here for another round of screwing around. So we got an interesting deal coming up in Florida today in Fort Myers. We're looking at a very, very high-end RV park. But before we jump into that, we'll kind of go around the horn. Eric, what's new in your world, sir?
Saw a cool thing last night. Was in a little town called Bend, Oregon, and it's got a groovy little town square grid system downtown, and in an alleyway, a gentleman had taken a space, put in a bar and 16 seats, and shows movies. It's like a this miniature groovy movie theater. And he's got a fantastic business. He's been there for like 10 years selling drinks and showing art movies. But it was just like such a contrast to the, remember the Megaplex 20 screen theaters out by the interstate and that whole experience. Like, you know, this was like the opposite of it and just absolutely fantastic. And I could see, I don't know, I could just see more of that happening. Like, I can't imagine going to see a movie another way than after having experienced this little scene. So, anyway, that was the cool part of my night. And a minor league baseball game. What's better than that?
Yeah, I hear that.
It's pretty good. I've got my best friend and the best man at my wedding used to live in Burlington, Vermont, and they have this, I think it's AA or AAA ball club there called the Lake Monsters. And he lived on this dead-end road, and the ballpark was at the end of the dead-end road, and he was the last house. And so we'd go up and visit him, and then we'd just walk like 30, 40 yards to the ballpark, stand outside, catch a minor league game, have a beer in the bleachers. It was pretty good.
Some good living there.
Yeah, minor league baseball is good living.
I agree.
Yeah, it's fun.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, that business, it's kind of a cool business. If you own, I know some people that own those teams, and basically you get told by the franchise, like if you're the owner of the team, you have really no say-so whatsoever about what goes on the field. It's different than owning, say, a major league team where you're involved in moving people around. You basically abdicate all your rights to the franchise, you know, if it's the Red Sox or whoever's doing it. Your job is to supply the stadium and sell popcorn. And you make money just on beer, Cokes, popcorn, and any sort of entertainment that you can weave into that. And you let those guys put on the show. But it's a fun little business. You can use that as sort of an anchor to create small little, you know, kind of entertainment districts. And you do it, and it's done at a scale that's just a lot more consumable than these, you know, over the top ballparks. It gets things back to more like a Fenway sort of experience.
Yeah,
which is one of life's great treats.
Have you? You're a Georgia man. Have you been to see a game in Macon, Georgia? They've got a minor league club down there. We did a deal in Macon, and they're called the Macon Bacon, and their mascot is a strip of bacon, and the the guys have done such a good job with the product that they put out. Like they've got the concessions, but they've got good food and they've got kind of local craft beer and they do tons of stuff for the kids. Like in between the innings, they're doing like pig races and mascot races and pickleball tournaments. They just have like, there's so much going on in addition to the baseball that they've put out an unbelievable product. It's a ton of fun to go to one of those games.
I don't know if it's the same person or they just took a page from his book, but there's the counterpart to the Macon Bacon is the Savannah
Yeah,
Bananas.
I was just going to bring them up.
Yes, same league. Yep.
And that cat is one of the great marketers of our era who's put that on, and he's kind of like this P.T. Barnum of baseball and created this fantastic product that where the baseball is almost secondary.
Yeah.
It's really cool. If anyone is listening and is in Macon, I highly recommend you go see one of those games. Super cool.
And I'm sorry if you're in Macon.
And if you're in Macon,
condolences.
Home of the Mercer Bears.
Condolences.
Home of the Mercer Bears and Allman Brothers, right?
Yeah, they do. They have an Allman Brothers museum. I won't call out the politician by name because it's just poor form, but we were doing a deal in Macon and there was this one politician who was talking about the terrible conditions at the property that we were looking to acquire and renovate. It's a senior high rise. He's making all these stump speeches about this is a travesty, and he's also a record producer, which what the fuck ever. And I called his office a couple times because again, I agree with you, right? And we are interested in buying it, fixing it. We're aligned here on what the issue is. Never answers the phone, never gets back to me. It's just like the appearance of being concerned.
Right. Yeah.
And then we have our city council meeting where we're asking for matching funds to do our tax credit deal. And he just starts going off. He like showed up late, dressed like shit, starts lobbing these accusations about like, I heard their company is being sued. And I said, well, could you be more specific? Like, I'm not aware of that. And he said, well, that's just what I've heard. And I said, do you have any, that's where I first got to spend a lot of time with local politicians who are largely, some of them mean well, and some of them are just interested in furthering, most of them are interested in furthering their own agenda.
I had that conversation. You said, I heard they're being sued. I was having this conversation this week with, in retail leasing, the way the world works is that these companies, say you're whatever, Lululemon or Walgreens or whoever they have real estate representatives that handle real estate decisions. And these are typically overworked people that live on airlines and have to fly around the country looking at new sites, and they get to a location and they're picked up at the airport by their local independent broker who becomes their seeing eye dog to show them potential opportunities around town. And they're making these multi-million-dollar decisions based on, to a large extent, a drive-by from a windshield tour from a car to decide if this is a location for them or not. And there's so much power that's in the hands of who's ever in the car. It's rarely is it the property owner or the property owner's representative. And so the brokers have this amazing amount of power over how these decisions are made simply by making an offhanded comment. If there's a site they didn't want something directed to, this guy who was in that business was saying that he could just throw a comment that's like, oh, I hear that might be going into foreclosure.
The people are telling me. I'm hearing the people are saying.
Has no bearing on any sort of facts or whatever. And then, you can imagine some time-stressed, real estate bureaucrat going, okay, what's next? And then, totally scuttles any possibility of the deal. How about you, Brett? What do you know?
Nothing too much to note other than it does feel like the window in the commercial real estate business is open right now. So it will be, I think there'll be a flurry of activity here. And so we'll see how long this lasts, but there's been no shortage of fits and starts over the last 2+ years with interest rates, but it does feel like the market is coalescing around. It is what it is right now for the first time in a while. And that's not to say there's a boogeyman or two around some corners out there, which just remains to see which corners they jump out of. But I think it should be an interesting final 5 months of the year here.
You guys getting some BOVs done that you think are going to have some traction and probably transact?
Yeah, I do. I do. And
Good.
it's the first time in a while that I can say that we feel that way. So, which is just in time for it all to change, as we know in this business too.
Well, let's jump into a deal that may trade because I think it's interesting. Yeah. We are in Brett's home state, Florida.
Foreign country by the name of Florida. Don't blame us.
Yep.
Tank tops and jean shorts. Let's bring it
on camera, but I do have jean shorts and a Motley Crue tank top in honor of today's episode. I'm happy to be back in Florida.
Nice. Happy to have you.
We're happy to have you. We're going to take a look at a deal called Laguna Caribe. It's a 137 lot Class A motor coach and like RV thing. Do you know what this casita is? You know what a casita resort is?
I do.
Brett? Is this the thing you've heard of?
What's interesting about this, and I know I have lots of cool stories here, but when COVID started in March of 2020, I was traveling for work a lot, and we had just had our surprise third kid. And that rocked my world in a different way. And I was like, we got to get out of here. Like, we got to my former business partner. Like, what can we do? We wanted to be responsible. And so we rented a Sprinter van and drove up to Eric's neck of the woods and just had meetings with people like on golf courses and in their front yards. Awesome. But on the way home, we stopped at one of these high end like RV / mobile home parks. And it was awesome. I mean, it was a ton of fun. And it reminds me a lot of this. This one's nicer, but I was telling Eric before you got on, Elliott, the mobile home park deal, and there are varying degrees, like so many, or varying levels, like they're on so many things in American society. But this is like the ultra libertarian kind of deal where nobody cares what you're doing or what you're into. Just leave me alone.
Right. Just leave me alone.
Yeah. Human trafficking, drug dealing. No clue what's going on here. Just don't bother me.
That's great.
Yeah.
I've got a soft spot. I've never been to one, so I shouldn't say I have a soft spot for these. But I fundamentally understand the appeal. Like, it doesn't have to be for me to understand why this would be attractive to people. And this appears to be in the range of RV parks. This seems like the best of the best. Is that fair? Is that kind of what this is?
Yeah, I mean, this is high end. I think our manufactured housing team sits in the office here in Orlando, and there's certainly this connotation for mobile home parks, which is not great. But then you have like this one's pretty nice, obviously, and then you have some ultra high end ones in Southern California, right on the water, which I think a lot of the institutions have played ball on those. And I mean, it's essentially a ground lease for an apartment deal or a residential deal.
Yeah, so let's give a run through of this place at a high level, and then we'll get into why you're doing it. So you're in Fort Myers. Looks like you're in North Fort Myers.
Yeah.
And this was delivered this year. So it's brand new construction, 127 lots, 10 of which have previously been sold. So I guess you're buying 127 of these things, but you've got, 10 independent owners. That's my wife checking on me. You got 10 independent owners, and I guess you're buying the bulk of the rest of it. So presumably there's some relationship to work out with those 10 owners about their share of the common area expenses or however this all gets built back. But you're buying 35 total acres. And my God, I hate to say it, and you brokers love this term, but Brett, is this a covered land play for some 20-year stretch? Like, is the implicit bet here that you have created a nice enough space, but it's not terribly expensive to create, right? You've just got some paving and then this community building, which is expensive. But is the idea, or Eric, you may have a thought here too, are you buying 35 acres here, assuming that the current return generates some cash flow that you like, and you're preserving some back-end redevelopment options should the density in Fort Myers continue to expand north? Is that directionally correct?
I think that would be ideal. My guess is that the pricing of this thing is you're paying a lot more than the land value, than what it would be as raw land. So you're on these kind of things, you're making a you're making a bet on the viability of this as an RV park. And RV parks are a subset of the mobile home park world, and this is a subset of that, of the super class A type world. So this has a much higher fit and finish. It looks like it's got this snaking road through it that has these concrete pads laid throughout it so that it makes it easy to back in these monstrous motor coaches. These look like Allman Brothers tour buses that you can put into these, that you can I'm guessing the average age of the driver of this is probably in their 70s, and you got to find a place to put this while you're traveling the country. And this is highly amenitized landscape, swimming pools, movie stars, palm trees. And so this appeals to a kind of the high end subset. And, you're sort of competing with, I think zoning can be a thing that makes these more difficult to build. Folks aren't generally fans of this type of product because it feels like a mobile home park, and the idea of bringing low income folks into a neighborhood is kind of difficult. So upside
I
is
know that to be true.
Right.
once you have one of these things, I think there is a bit of a moat around protection from oversupply, because people generally are opposed to them being built.
Yeah, that's definitely the vibe, is that people tend to push back against these. I'm a little surprised to see their rent.
Yeah, with mobile home parks, there's this underlying idea that you as the tenant go out and buy your trailer and you put it in place, and it's a colossal pain in the ass and expense to move it. So that the general operating premise is for the owner of the mobile home park to, it's kind of like boiling a frog. They just keep turning the heat up on the rent, incrementally, knowing that these folks that are, usually stretched pretty thin, don't have a lot of options, and they've got an investment in the actual mobile home, and there's a cost and risk to moving it. So they're able to just kind of continuously turn up the heat. RVs are a little bit of a different game because these have wheels on them, and at a certain level, they'll just split and move. So these are more, it's more. This is almost like a hotel business,
with a lot less overhead.
Yeah,
With a lot less overhead.
right? And a lot less improvements. It's all horizontal improvements. This is unique with these casitas
Very
that
unique.
we can talk about. But this, generally, you're not building anything higher than a curb when you're building a mobile home or RV park.
What I think is so interesting about, I'm surprised at the rent here and just some of the economics. So maybe this is helpful if you're thinking about buying one of these. The way some of these folks look at occupancy is the most occupancy they think you're going to hit is 85%, and that's really during, right? Those are during the months you want to be in Florida. Like right now, Florida is a godforsaken toilet state. It's 100 degrees and it's humid. It's a terrible place to live. Brett lives there. He can attest to this. He's unhappy with the choices that he's made in his life that have led him to living in Orlando in June. It's just a bad place.
It's consensual with me being here. We have no
Yeah,
Ivy
okay,
League schools
fine.
in science, but there are other endearing qualities. But to your point, Elliott, now is a brutally oppressive time to live in Florida for like the next 4 months.
It's a bad time. And what you have failed to do correctly, which Eric, who I'm still convinced is actually the most interesting man in the world, Eric, are you in Idaho right now?
I'm close. I'm in Oregon heading to
You're in
Idaho.
Oregon. You're in Oregon heading to Idaho. Eric is an Atlanta native who knows that Atlanta is a bad place to be this time of year. And so he grabs his flannel and heads west and builds things with his hands and goes fishing and does all those things. So the peak occupancy you're going to get in Florida is going to be when everyone else wants to be there, which presumably is like December, January, February, March, like winter time. And the consensus seems to be during those months you'll hit 85% occupancy. That's like about the peak pro forma on this thing. And then you're going to see that occupancy dip down to maybe 25% in the summertime. And so from a modeling exercise or understanding your rent throughout the year, that ebb and flow is interesting. And then the pricing really varies pretty widely. You've got some of these resorts here, peak pricing, which is the winter time. They'll rent these lots out for somewhere between $3,500 and $5,000 a month for your pad, and then off peak it could be 1,900 or 1,800. So it's more than double what you would expect. So not only are you getting a hell of a lot more income during the peak season, but just the whipsaw in your financing probably impacts your ability to get debt because your cash flows aren't that steady. But I'm actually quite surprised that someone would pay $5,000 a month to park, plus presumably there's an additional $1,000 a month in incidental and electric and clubhouse. And there's got to be fees and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then you've got your cost of the motorhome, and then your cost of living on the road. I mean, it's not a cheap thing to do, despite the perception of this being kind of a lower income deal.
I've got a pal in San Francisco whose father died, and his dad owned one of these grand motor coaches, and his mother's like, Dad, Dad wanted you to have this thing, and so he flew to Virginia to pick up this motor coach. He got a couple of guys to go with him, and they were going to do this, cross country jaunt in the motor coach. You get in it. There's no training required. He gets in. I don't know if you have to have a special license, but he didn't have it. Starts driving this thing, which he says is a paralyzing white knuckle experience to drive this big bus on the highway. Three guys, they get where they're going the first night and said, I'm not sleeping in this damn thing. So they rent a hotel, have to park the RV outside of it, and then continue on this hellish journey across the U.S., gets it back to San Francisco. He's got to have a place to put it, which is not easy to find. So he ends up storing the thing, and I think a number of around $5,000 a
Yeah.
month just to keep it,
Whoa.
plus the expenses of upkeep and maintenance and all this. Anyway, it took him like a year and $30,000 to scrape the thing off his shoe, but he's no longer a motor coach owner. So I think it takes a certain free spirit that wants to burn cash in such a way.
Yeah. It would be interesting. So it sounds like they're doing monthly leases here versus 12-month leases. And you would think some folks might be willing to do a 12-month lease just to have the assurances that it would be there from Thanksgiving through Easter or whatever we say the prime time to be in Florida is.
Oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I wonder if there's like a shortage of these spaces, and you do have to sign a longer term thing. Like we'll hold your space, but we only do, a 6 month minimum rental or something
Right.
like that.
I'm also super keen on the idea of the sale that a certain number of these are sailed. I'm flashing on the idea that maybe that was a financing mechanism of pre-sell a few of these lots, get the cash to borrow the rest to do the improvement.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty ingenious
So
side of things.
so you've got here they're saying roughly 2 million in NOI, and bear in mind this is brand new, so these are just projections, and brokers, Brett, I
Yeah,
love you.
thank you.
You guys tend to be a shade optimistic on your
Just a
NOI, but
teensy
let's
bit,
sort of,
teensy bit.
yeah, let's assume that this is a real 2 million, right?
Incredible.
Where, what are you going to pay for that? Like you've got a lumpy cash flow stream. Presumably, the barrier to entry isn't that high. In 2 or 3 years, someone else could find a because you're not in Fort Myers, you're outside of Fort Myers, right? It's almost like the BTR deal. You're finding a large chunk of land, and your cost to build is not it's not eye watering, and I can't imagine the permitting process is that difficult. Uh, so presumably you don't have much of a moat. Uh, what is that cash flow stream worth to you? What kind of cap rate do you think something like this would trade at? I don't know the space at all, so I'm curious. Brett, you've got people on your team who do this. Are there market norms around cap rates here?
Manufactured housing, it would blow your mind at how low the cap rates are in this stuff.
But wouldn't you think that the manufactured housing where the homes are really set on the ground and don't move versus the RV parks where your tenant could leave at the end of the month, there's more stickiness in the manufactured housing tenant side than there is in
Yeah,
the RV park side? Is there any difference in cap rates or
that's a
no?
good question. I don't know the answer is my straight up answer there. And so I would say that, for manufactured housing, as you think about it, mobile home parks, and I forget if it was you or Eric said it earlier. I mean, you really are, that's the last place to go for a lot of folks. So let's just say it is what it
Yeah,
is. Probably not too much different, Elliott, than some of the workforce housing where the next
sure.
place for you is on the streets, that's a whole different
Yep.
conversation from a social perspective. But here, if you just look at like that RV that was like this one here or this one, I mean, that's $500,000. So you're talking about a completely different demographic here. But that doesn't mitigate the comment you just made, Elliot, about if these aren't 12-month leases, is your pad vacant from Memorial Day through Labor Day when it's oppressively hot down here. But I would bet for something of this caliber, you're probably doing 6 to 12 month leases would be my guess. And then if you're there for the 6 good months of the year, your rent is going to be exponentially more than it would be through the oppressive summer months.
Yeah, and boy, it even begs the question if this is a high end consumer, which based on the look of the place, the RV that they're showing in the photos, like it's clear who you're going after. These are $500,000
Right.
RVs. Is that consumer even gonna? It's the idea of coming to Florida in the winter. That's not even gonna fucking darken, or in the summer. That's not gonna darken their door at
No.
all. They've got enough disposable income and enough interest in this lifestyle. They're gonna say, screw that. In the summertime, we go to
Yeah.
Minnesota. We do this there. We do this in Florida in the
No.
winter. We go there in the summer. So if you're targeting a higher end RV consumer, you have to wonder if that person even comes to Florida in the summer, or if that 25% occupancy assumption in June, July, and August is that even optimistic?
Well, yeah, and I think that's a good point too. And kind of going on a different tangent here, what we saw during COVID when, a lot of the Northeast was locked down in California, we saw a lot of the apartment communities that were close to the water saw an unbelievable uptick in rents. And a lot of people there were just saying, I'm not buying a house, but I'll rent an apartment close to the water for 12 months. And if it's $2,500 a month, what does that take you out to? 30 grand a year. I mean, that's kind of chunk. I mean, that's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but for rich people or the higher end folks in the demographic cohort, that's kind of dropping the hat money, right? I mean, that's kind of a house on Martha's Vineyard for a week in the summertime, or maybe half.
I guess your demographic might shift a bit in the
Yeah,
summer, right? Maybe you're not getting the $500,000 RVs, you're getting the $150,000 RVs, and it's just kind of maybe a different vibe in the summer. But
potentially, yeah.
I think there's probably an interesting sociology to understand the person that's renting the Martha's Vineyard house is a completely different person that owns a $500,000 RV.
mm-hmm.
Even if you thought about, financial net worth is probably, could be the same. They're two completely different mindsets of people. Another issue with these things that RV parks, mobile home parks, they all lack that sweet depreciation factor that's present
Yep.
in the rest of the real estate world. And
Right.
so most of your purchase price is going to land and long-term improvements, so you don't get the tax benefits that are so sweet in other property types.
So I think you have to buy this and assume you'll lose your top of market rent competitiveness in 3 or 4 years. Someone else builds a newer, bigger, better mousetrap. So maybe you don't experience rent growth during the first 5 years, and maybe just sort of flat, right? Because you would think maybe it'll trend up a bit, but then if a new competitor comes into the market, you have to tranche down a bit below them. You don't get the depreciation. You're really betting on kind of current term cash yields, and is this dirt you'd like to own in 20 or 30
Right.
years?
And I mean, the other thing, not to nerd out here too, in terms of you get to a cap rate, yes, but you look at the operating expense margin on something like this. So for a conventional multifamily deal, just back of the napkin, you would assume the NOI margin is 60% or the expense margin is 40% of the total income. Is that a fair back of the napkin, Elliott, Eric? And so here you would probably, I'm guessing this would be closer to 15 to 20%, because really what you're talking about here is maybe one full-time on-site person and a maintenance person, I would think. So maybe your expense margin is closer to 15 to 20%, which is a huge driver in value if you're capping that at a 7, let's just say, numbers out of thin air.
The flip side of having no depreciation, the good side is that the CapEx required to keep this place going is much smaller than what you'd see in a Florida apartment building.
Yeah, because a lot of these manufactured or mobile home park communities, you have on-site wastewater treatment plants and some other pretty heavy CapEx items. Once those things go down, I'd imagine these just have the hookups that go in that are tied into the sewer system. So you would think that on a long-term basis would be better than having to manage an on-site wastewater treatment facility. I, again, don't know anything about wastewater treatment facilities, but they sound expensive.
I think that I am really curious about the sale of these, and I think that could be an interesting exit assumption on these type of things. Of if you had the capacity or the interest of selling off individual pads, because as opposed to dealing with a mobile home park where your customer doesn't have the financial capacity to do this is the type thing where there might be a series of buyers that would.
Yeah, I think it is that optionality around exit that Eric's touching on there. So you buy it today for a cash flow stream. Yeah, you buy it for a cash flow stream, and you maybe buy in 127 of these lots for what you think is 80% of the fair market value if you kind of condo these out or sold them out one off, and then so you cash flow it for a few years with maybe the thought that you exit these one by one through a retail exit strategy.
It's the same crowd that's buying high-end cemetery lots. You could probably do a twofer with these too. Maybe that's what it becomes. Is it's a whole. You get your place, and you can be buried in your RV.
We'll sell you the lot and bury you in your RV on the lot.
And then it just becomes headstones, and then there's then maintenance costs.
You don't want to be one of the last folks to die there. I think you want to be on the front end of that trend.
But then you have it all to yourself.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Then it's your place.
The only neighbors are the ghosts that come out at night, and they say some weird stuff. But during the day, it's very quiet here.
I do like the idea of being the first operator to pitch the RV park to cemetery.
It's covered land play, not office going mixed use. It's rental pads going to cemeteries.
It's probably a pretty quick turn. I mean, you think about the folks driving these things; they're only a few steps away. I like the whole marketing concept.
God, this is
amazing. Where's the mall with the defunct retailers that we can put next door to the covered cemetery land play?
All right, so these casitas, this is all very new to me, so I'm seeing what's going on here. It's like a 400 to 500 square foot building, and you don't there's no bedrooms. It's just meant to be as like a grill, a patio, and then it's got an indoor space with a kitchen, presumably a living room and bathrooms, right? Because you don't want to be going to the bathroom in your RV when you're parked.
No.
And so I don't know that many of them have been developed, but I guess the idea, and they provided a couple different potential floor plans, you could build some of these casitas at your cost and then charge a premium rent for the pads that have the casitas. And then you do enough of them, I guess you can depreciate those.
Let's get something straight real quick, Elliot. You don't want to be going to an RV bathroom on an RV ever. If you had your druthers, right? I mean, especially if it's your RV.
Yeah, I would go in your
Well,
RV. And then
I know you would, but the problem for me is I don't have an
Yeah.
RV. But if I ever rent one, I'm driving it
Yeah.
straight. I'm going to pick up Eric in Atlanta, and we're coming straight to your house.
Come straight to my house, park in the driveway.
Yeah, you can go to the bathroom in the RV. Eric and I are going to the bathroom in your house.
Yeah, it sounds right.
Fair trade, as Drake would say. It sounds like a fair trade to me.
Sure.
That's the Randy Quaid shitters full.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I don't know. Look, it's interesting. There's obviously a number where it works.
I think the casita makes it very much. I mean, you're truly in the hotel business. Then building. You're building effectively a community of Airbnbs and all the hassle that comes with that.
Right. I say it all the time. My favorite thing about these idiots who are like, I'm an Airbnb guru, is you have got all of the associated with hotels with none of the upside that comes from the scale of owning hotels. It's the dumbest fucking business. It's remarkable. Unless you are doing really unique stays in vacation destinations, these donkeys who are doing, converting a two-family or a two-bedroom house into a rental in Dayton, Ohio, for the love of God. Anyway, got off track. So, Eric, if you're going to buy this, there's no casitas that I can see that have been built yet, or maybe there's been one or two. What's your plan going in? You buy it, you set some money aside to build 6 or 7 of them, a couple different floor plans, and you see what kind of premium you can get, because the lot rent could be $4,000 for just the lot. You assume it's an extra $1,000 for the casita. I mean, you have to sort of figure out your return on cost there. But you're not planning on doing this for all of them, right? It'd be an incremental improvement based on feedback from the renters.
Yeah, I have a hard time getting excited about this in any way, but yeah, because the flip side of that is you're also limiting the utility of the space to someone that's willing to pay, a big premium. So if the lot rent without the casita is $5,000, it would be something more with the casita. But say the RVer wasn't interested in the casita, they're not going to want to pay for it. So you've limited your potential customers by some sort, or you end up having to give it to them at a discount. I don't know. This is a tough kind of thing because at $2 million, you're paying $30 million for 30 acres of how many acres is it?
35 acres.
35 acres of residential land in Florida, Fort Myers. I don't know. I'd have to. This is a tough one to swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like if you just assume, let's just say $1.8 million for NOI, right? Let's just assume a 20% expense margin, and you just assume a 7.5% exit cap. That's like $21 million. And if you divide that by 37 acres, I mean, that's $575,000 an acre, which doesn't seem insane to me in Florida.
Well, you can have it, Brett.
Well, I mean, I like this. I
Brett,
like this. We're going to get back to the whole.
I think Brett's the buyer here.
I like it. It's unique.
This is of course, Brett's the buyer.
Yeah.
You need a guy who loves Florida, who's
Loves
got a
Gene
little
Short.
bit of that. Yeah, he's got some of that Gene Short vibe in him, and he just thinks,
gold
what?
chains.
I want to own this
I've got some
place.
gold chains from high school I can rock down there too.
Right. Take the kids to see the Red Sox spring training. This is, dude, you're the buyer.
Yeah, I'm in. Do you guys have any money that I can borrow?
I think if you could get a rebrand as like a Margaritaville RV park, and get that cast of characters and have this as a Jimmy Buffettville, then
Yeah,
that's kind of who this that's kind of the appeal.
that's the vibe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the buyer.
There's always, I think, some weird stuff that happens at those resorts, but
This would be a different, probably more of a
it's probably part of the appeal.
less drug dealing, less human trafficking, more probably swinging. I would guess would be going on here. Yeah, that's why you
Swinging.
need the
I think that's
casita.
what
Like
it
you don't
is.
want that on your RV, but like in the casita, that's fine.
Yeah, right. No, you just need a casita with a bunch
Yeah,
of tarps.
right. No black lights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I just don't know enough about this space, but it feels like your rent upside is capped. You're right about the casitas. You don't want to do too many because then you're forcing people to take them. They may not want them. So I think your rental upside is capped to some extent, and there's just so many unknowns. I don't know how you finance this thing.
They're
And
financeable. It's just that condo component is going to be a little tricky, but I think you're going to have control over the
yeah,
HOA, so that'll be a good thing.
I don't think I'm a buyer. I think Big City Eric is not a buyer. This is beneath him, but sounds like Brett might be a
It's a
buyer.
deal for the Florida man at its finest.
It's a deal for the Florida man.
Jorts, wife beater, and what else do you? And some alligators and
Yeah,
some other.
yeah, it's exactly right. Yeah, it's true. You could add gators to
Yeah,
your water
all right. A
feature,
mini golf
and
course. Like, what more do you need here? Like, this is great. I'm in.
yeah. All right, Brett's in. Eric and I are out. What else, gents? Is
That's
that
about
about
a
it?
wrap.
that's the pod.